So I'd like y'all to think about for just 1 second just what a mixed group you've got in the room, and it is absolutely, this was Carl's vision when we thought about this about 3 years ago before the first one, is some of you end up in funders conferences and you don't have any Chamber of Commerce people there. Some of you end up in Chamber of Commerce meetings and you don't have any workforce people there. A whole bunch of you end up in workforce meetings and there's nobody else in the room except the workforce people talking about the issues. And our vision was to force you all together to think about this stuff. So a couple suggestions along the way is change tables as the day goes. We don't need all the Sykesville people sitting with, all the Fort Smith. Y'all mix up, get to know each other. Come talk to me as the day goes on and tell me your story. We've worked with about half the people in the room at some point or another. The thoughtfulness of what y'all said was great. I want you to think about something. Most of the time when you go around a room like this, by the third table, if you're talking about a single subject, there's nothing else to say. You've covered all the issues. We got through the whole room and new issues were coming up at every table. And that's sort of the issue that we come up with against workforce, is it's very, very complex. Today we've got a full agenda. Delighted this afternoon that James and Deb Fallows are going to spend an afternoon with us, and I got a note from Clark that they're actually going to spend the whole afternoon with us and go to dinner with us tonight. So for those of you who are going to see them talk some other time or some other place, I doubt you're going to get their full attention for the afternoon. And the reason is that they love this concept of getting groups this diverse together to talk. So we're delighted to have that here. Couple quick things. There are flip charts around the room. We like collecting thoughts and questions and suggestions, so just write them on there and we'll try to deal with them as the time goes. This is designed to be informal. I'm sorry for the raised stage. We thought about putting everybody on the floor and so we couldn't see each other, and so we decided to do that. But we are collecting everything. We want to do that. Some of you, probably all of you got, and some of you probably read a report that looked something like this. It's not final, that's why it doesn't look pretty yet. But it is the research we've been doing to look at workforce over the last few months, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We're going to spend the next about 20 minutes sort of setting the stage from a data and question standpoint. And I'm going to start by just saying that this is a different type of gathering because your goal is to build relationships with each other. We expect you to do that. We expect you to work with other practitioners that you see to share best practices, but also talk to the funders, talk to the people who are studying this, and try to do so in a way that's a little less formal than the normal way that we do conferences. I describe workforce as this. It's navigating the asteroid field. This is the Star Trek model, Star Wars model, where Han Solo is trying to get away in the first, or if you're a nerd, episode 4 of Star Wars. Time travel and all that. C-3PO says to Han that the odds are pretty long, and what does Han say? Never tell me the odds, right? Because he didn't have any choice. And this is what it looks like to try to deal with workforce problems, except we don't have any choice. We're going to do it. We're going to have to. So what is that complexity that's out there? Now, just a couple things. I didn't introduce myself before because I knew I was going to do it here. We run a firm called Economic Leadership that does work all over the country in workforce issues. We're currently doing the state chamber plans in West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Arkansas. We've completed ones in Kentucky and Missouri, and we do a lot of local plans on just what is it employers need from the workforce world. And we do 3 things. We do data analytics. Sarah's right, we're big data geeks, and we look at every piece of data we can find, and so we look at Brookings data all the time, and we look at Aspen's data all the time. We look at everybody's data, everything we can find, and we compare places. At the end of this presentation, I'll tell you, we got one more piece we're going to send you out that we've just been doing talent attraction data for every metro and micro in America, and we're going to send you that report tomorrow. We do trend spotting. What is it around that corner over the future that you can see that's going to change our lives? And we're going to spend some time doing futures the next few days. And then we do lots of best practices. And for our report here, we did some best practices, and then in the appendix, we created a best practices that we're seeing in workforce that we're going to make a live document after this conference. We're going to keep it going for the next forever, or until Carl tells us to quit, where we hope you'll help us find whatever the best practices are out there around different pieces of the workforce problem. But we also do the last piece, and I hope we'll deal with it today. A couple of you mentioned it, which is how do you get all the different people involved in workforce to collaborate together on solutions. Collaborative leadership is a tough thing. If you follow the models that came out of Stanford and other models, they're smart. They on paper they work, but how do you get people to work together toward a common goal with different perspectives on what they really want from that common goal is tricky. And so one of the ways we like to do is force them in a room and make them talk for a couple days. Our specific asteroid field is made more complex by demographics. We have an aging workforce. We have lower participation rates. We have declining mobility. We have declining fertility. We have declining immigration policy. I mean, the math, as we say in our office, the math sometimes sucks. Sorry. It just doesn't work. The math doesn't work well. The economics are tough. We've had a huge, lengthy expansion that's led to robust employment and low unemployment and tight labor markets. The skill mismatches are real. We do surveys of businesses. I think we've got 3 closed this week, Carly, is that right? Of thousands of businesses around the country asking them questions, and nobody thinks they can find people with the right skills. Let's go ahead and tell you, taxes aren't as bad, regulations not as bad, tort reform's not, none of that. That all scores in this range. Finding people with the right skills, the bottom of every survey we've done in the last year. I can't find people, businesses tell us over and over, Greg, how many CEOs did you survey? I mean, dozens and dozens of CEOs, 30-minute phone calls, everybody's got the same issue. Skills don't match. Okay, well, I think we can say successfully that skills don't match. Now, what do we do about it? And then you throw on top of that all the technology and automation issues. The fact that everybody's got to be more in tune and able to use the tech that's there and fight the displacement that might be there. And then finally, the big national debate we've got ourselves into now is why is everybody screwed up and nobody teaching the right skills? And I agree completely with several things I said. You're going to see me say it in a few minutes. Starts at age pre-0 and finishes when you die. And we are looking for blame. We're looking for scapegoats. And it's everybody and every group and every place's responsibility. When you think about the future, and we're going to do some futurist work in a few minutes, I mean, there are so many trends that are impacting, it makes our heads explode. I mean, what is going to be the impact of just augmented reality on work, or of cognitive systems and the way we work, or inequity and its expansion? How's that going to change our society? And then how do you get it all together in a way that makes a picture that we're completely paralyzed by the complexity. And so some of you in the room were on those big, audacious ideas. Now, how do we fix inequity? How do we deal with multi-generational poverty? Others of you were, how do we increase apprenticeship? And they're all needed, and they're all different. In principle, it's pretty simple, right? We're trying to meet the supply and demand. Yeah, sounds pretty easy. And then when we put a workforce system, it looks like that. And you've all seen those. My favorite, I think, was President Obama's mapping of just the federal programs a few years back, where there were 90 blocks on the thing, and they were in 9 departments, and none of them, but anyway, that's what we deal with. And if you're a business, if you deal with businesses every day like we do, they're just going, just don't tell me. I don't want to know. And yet, this is the most important thing. So we're dealing with 2 issues, basically. We're dealing with a quantity issue and a quality issue. And that sounds fairly simple. We're trying to balance automation and robotics and the loss of jobs against slowing birth rates and aging baby boomers and decline, all that. We're trying to get that right. And we know some of the data's tough. We are now in 97 straight months of private sector job expansion. 56 is the average. We usually have a downturn, and we haven't had one. And so what's happened, when you add that to the fact that our labor force is slowly growing at the slowest rate that it's grown in a very long time, you end up with unemployment rates that are historically low. Now, I know participation rates and I know out of work rates and all, but just the people looking for work, there's not many of them out there right now. When we look at participation rates, we end up with data that shows that us old people, somebody mentioned, you said them with similar tsunami, so I'm going to hold that against you the rest of the day, I want you to know. But when you look at it, some of us old people are working longer, and yet if you look at the 16 to 19 and the 20 to 24-year-olds, that's where our participation rates have declined. Now, some of that's because we're sending them to school, and we did that on purpose because they need more education, but some of it is because, you know, that adage of mom's basement is also true. And then we have this mobility issue, that we no longer move for jobs, we stay. And so we're stuck. And what that creates is a quantity issue that we're having trouble getting out of. Domestic migration, there are places people are moving. My home state of North Carolina and South Carolina, they're moving a lot. Other places, they're not moving toward, they're moving away. And so in this room, we've got a bunch of states. Some of you are net importers and some of you are net exporters, and the struggles are different for both, but they're still struggles. Then you've got the quality issue. You're trying to map, now, we send more people to college than we ever have. We graduate more people from high school than we ever have. And yet every employer survey we have says it doesn't match. I can't find people. So we sit around and we argue fairly vehemently about the types of jobs. And you know, from this report, if it's not normal, if it's not typical, if it's not routine, it's growing, and if it is, it's not. I think it's about perfect. We've been trying to figure out for the last 3 years what people really want in the business community. This is our cartoon drawing of what we actually hear employers tell us. They tell us they want 4 skills. They want personal skills at the top of the list: honesty, responsibility, integrity, self-motivation. They want people skills, which is good because robots don't do that quite as well. They want communication, and they want teamwork, and they want empathy, and they want sales. They want thinking skills, absolutely. They want problem solving and critical thinking, and especially adaptability. And they want some sort of technical skills, whether that is the integration with the technology they have, or they want the bricklayer to be able to lay bricks, or the phlebotomist to be able to take blood, or whatever it is. And somehow or another, all those lists of the top 10 skills everybody needs and wants, and what falls into something up here. And the truth is, we want it all. And we don't want to pay for it, and we've got that side of this, and we want it all. So we've got a quality and we've got a quantity issue. And then we try to deal with that by figuring out the pipeline. And so we start with little babies and we finish up here with just jobs. And you know, I don't know what the pipeline really is, but it's the accumulation of all of this. So you can do everything from teen pregnancy prevention to neonatal care before it starts. And then you can work on better parent training. Linda and I do work for the Kettering Foundation, and we go out and do community forums, and you know, it's about the 10-minute mark in every community forum when somebody finally gets up and says, we just need parents to be better. And you say, well, okay, yeah, all right, write that down. And then you try to figure that out. I mean, whether it's universal early K, pre-K, is it? I mean, those are all issues. In school, is it? Everybody wants you to be able to read, write, critically. They want the foundation. They want the soft skill development, absolutely. Is that school? Is that back? Is that grandma? Is that wherever? They want work experience. They want technical skills. And then regardless of whether you're going to college, the military, or work, then your skills are obsolete in a few years anyway. You've got to start over. So you're going to start this whole treadmill again. And we know all of this is true. We can debate and argue and talk about all of this stuff all day long. But we're having to deal with big issues and small issues that make our heads explode and our communities challenged. So what? That's sort of the real question, right? So what? So when we did the research recently, we found around the country sort of 9 areas that we're seeing something happen. And Greg did most of the research on this, and he only has 3 more to do in the next couple of weeks, so it's good news for people who want to stay busy. We found that people were working hard today on improving the skills of existing workers, people that are already in the workforce. More training flexibility so that incumbent workers can get more targeted retraining and short-term training. We're seeing a whole lot of that. We're seeing a lot of aligned career pathways. It's a national movement, it makes sense. Within a region, trying to match what careers are out there with what opportunities are out there. Huge in the last couple years is the idea of targeted disconnecting groups. How do you get more people back into the labor force? How do you get ex-offenders? How do you get people who have dropped out somewhere along the way? How do you get people who have mental or physical challenges? How do we expand the labor force through bringing people who are disconnected back in? All over the country, the idea of promoting what is really a career, everything from big RVs running around the state of Arkansas and the state of North Carolina, and pretty soon the state of Missouri, because they got jealous and want one over there. I mean, to every high school, to Arkansas now sends a magazine home with every student in every high school class to give to their parents that talks about all the careers and what does it take to do this. We figured out that all of a sudden we actually need to paint a picture of what the jobs of the future are, because people don't know. They have no idea what their kids are going to do. They just know they want them to work and get out of the house. And so what is that? Student work-based learning is on the way up. You're seeing a lot of that through expanded CTE and other things in high schools. Lots of student work learning. This idea, a couple of you mentioned, how do you get and keep talent? We'll talk about that a little bit, but the whole idea behind talent attraction. Industry sectors, again, big focus area. Apprenticeships are a big focus area. And then finally, we are seeing, as data geeks, a whole lot more people collecting a whole lot more data. At the sub-regional level, at the block level, at everything. I mean, what do people have? We get asked every day for data that doesn't exist. Nobody collects that. Nobody requires anybody to tell you that. And I always tell groups, if you don't believe me, right now, tell me who knows what your skills are. You might have some loving family member who could tell you your skills, but almost nobody in this room has registered skills anywhere. Can't find out. How do you know? I can tell you if you have a college degree, maybe, by your census tract, not you personally, but how do I know what your skills are? Maybe I can do a search through, Sarah does all sorts of crazy searches through online boards and other things to try to figure this out, but it's hard. So data's gotten there and it's gotten better. What does all that mean? What's happening at the local level? We're seeing a few things locally. We're seeing more and more people adopt the region as the block. I mean, many of you are from communities that are smaller. It's regional. Well, labor sheds are regional. There's no doubt about it. People don't care where their employees come from. And if you go ask employers where their current employees come from, 30-minute drive time, 60-minute drive time, something. They never say from this county or that county, this city or that city. The isolation of workforce system components is a forever problem. My first job out of graduate school was working for the Baltimore Metropolitan Manpower Consortium. So I'm a recovering guy too. I was a CETA employee, and we talked about silos at the very first meeting I think I ever attended in my adult life. Well, we're a silo. We're still silos, right? And we don't like breaking out of them because they're complex. How do you get everybody to collaborate? How do you get collective leadership and collective impact modeling is key. This fourth one is we do have to see the community as broader than the people that are currently working. We have to see it there, and you can do that at a local level. One of my favorite best practices these days is the prisoner work in Missouri. They require everybody who's coming out on parole to get their work keys training. So that 17,000, I think that's right, 17,000 people come out of the parole system every year in Missouri, and they figured out that that's 17,000 more workers if they've got them ready to go to work. And so they do that. We keep talking about education as if it's either or. Either college or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm 61 years old, and we talked about that 40 years ago. That's not the way life is anymore. It's both, and we've got to get past that. We're seeing more and more workforce systems quick. They realize that they can't do a 10-year plan for career ladder training, that they're going to have to react every year. And then finally, on the talent attraction, people have figured out that it's not just being cool that causes talent attraction. It really is the basics. You really start with a job opportunity and housing and health and education. I go to meetings all the time where somebody pops up and says, well, and people are just moving places and then they'll look for a job because it's really about that. I'm sorry, they move to places that have too many jobs. The data shows if you move to Austin or Nashville or Seattle or Denver or Charlotte, you don't have to have a job because there's 10,000 vacancies. They're not moving to Fort Smith. They're moving places where there's opportunity, where they think there's opportunity for a spouse, where they think they can have affordable housing and a place to live and good schools. I've got focus on the basics. And you're seeing millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars spent nationally on talent attraction. And so we tried to catalog a lot of that within the report. Next week, we're going to send you a new report. We just finished doing a deep data dive on sort of a brain drain index around the country, looking at all 900 and, how many is it? 933 metros and micros in America. We weighted them around changing in the number of people advanced degrees in STEM, and all. This was our metric. And we've ranked every community in America on whether or not they're attracting or not attracting. And we're going to send you all that as sort of a thanks for coming to the conference prize next week. We'll send you the data out on that. When we look at workforce, what we find, yes, there's lots of issues. They're out there, they're complex, they're hard. You're dealing with them every day. There are also lots of people doing things that work. And if we can scale them and we can learn from each other, can we solve everything? No, not tomorrow. But can we deal with things and make them better? Yeah. So this afternoon, we're going to listen to the Fallows tell us a little bit about what they heard around the country. Joe's going to tell us tomorrow how you design a high school that actually deals with this as opposed to just putting an add-on to an existing school and trying to figure that out as we go forward. Tomorrow, some of you probably have read Christie's work at the National League on bridging gaps between urban and rural and how those ties can connect and make things better. And we're going to have them speak. But throughout all of this, we're going to have you talking to us. This afternoon, we're going to, end of the day, Anita's going to help us lead through a panel that looks at 3 of y'all's groups that are here and what you're doing, real, down and dirty kind of stuff, what's happening. Some of it surprising. When we started talking to Fort Smith earlier, the idea they have millage this year, they weren't sure was going to pass to improve workforce, and it passed overwhelmingly. And so there's been some surprises out there, and we're going to try to figure that out. I'm going to let you think about the future in a minute. I'll stop and ask if there are any questions on where we are and what the challenge ahead is. Okay. So you get to play futurists for a few minutes for us. And we like futurists. We think that it's always fun to start focusing. So what we want you to do for the next about 15 minutes at your tables is we want you to come up with some things that, given the nature, I saw a lot of nodding heads about what all of y'all said and what I said about the challenge we're at. So what is it that you see going forward over the next 10 years or so in either the political or leadership era, the business or economics, social or consumer preferences, or technologically, that you think is going to either help dramatically or hurt dramatically as we start planning for workforce. Because over the rest of the couple of days, we're going to talk about specific ideas, and I want to frame them in where we're headed, because the world's changing pretty quick. Is there anybody in the room, I always do this with groups, anybody in the room who thinks the speed of change is slowing down? I know it sounds funny, but I mean, so if you think back 10 years, 11 years, and realize that there were no smartphones 11 years ago. Now, if you go on this thing right now, you can see every job that's available in the state of Alabama, and you can register for every training program in the state. I mean, none of that existed 10 years ago. And yet today, it's part of how we deal with workforce. So I want you to think forward at your table. There's some index cards in the middle. I want you to write down just one or two really good trends you think are going to impact, and then we're going to let a few of you share them in a few minutes. Immediately after this, we're going to feed you. Wow. All right, also, yeah, especially for those of you who are Midwest time, you don't know, you don't care yet, but for those of you on the East Coast, so take about 15 minutes. I've got 12:32, about 15 minutes, then we'll let you share a few, and then we'll feed you some lunch. Work at your tables for a minute. All right, who's got a great prediction?
All right, I'll go.
Joe, for it.
All right, so we felt like a couple of things. Certainly technology changes. We're going to become harder and harder to predict where we're going, how we adjust to that, and how we kind of plan and evolve. We also talked a lot about how we felt like this shift in the unemployment rate, the demand that we're seeing from our employers, that higher education and the cost of it is about to see a real disruption. You know, employers are demanding, or willing to take people for jobs much quicker, right out of high school or right out of two-year college. And we really see a trend that employers are going to say, hey, look, we'll train them ourselves. Let's get them right out of high school. Let's get them a certification and then kind of build from there. We believe if the college system doesn't start to adjust and adapt to that and offer some sort of a 2-year and 4-year degrees with certification steps along the way that employers pay for, they're going to be missing the boat.
So all you university people, he's sitting at the table at the end during lunch. If you want to have a conversation, no, I'm just teasing. How many people, there's all sorts of predictions out there about what percentages of college are just going to go away. How many of you see an apocalypse coming for 4-year institutions? Anybody? It makes for great headlines, right? But probably not apocalypse, but I agree with you. How do you quantify certifications is going to be fun in the future. Who else? I do call on tables if they don't raise their hands, so it's okay. All right, you're over here. Go, Mike.
I think we're going to trend towards 30-hour work week.
30-hour work week. So here we are. We're back to science fiction for those of us in the room who we're there, right? All right. So, some of you have heard me talk about the fact that we were going to a 16-hour work week. All right. How many people in the room want a 30-hour work week? Come on, raise your hand. How many of you want a 60-hour work week because that's actually an improvement? No, okay, it's all right. It's all right. It's interesting, isn't it?
The reason I say that is the younger folks, they don't want to work. It appears that they want their free time and their home time.
All right, so all the millennials in the room, he'll be sitting at the second table if y'all want to have fun with him. That's great. Work weeks might change, right? Some of you have seen the data. I mean, we work a whole lot less hours than we used to as a society. Right now, and I think the numbers are from about 3,000 hours a year to about 1,800 and going down. So we're on the track. Not us, we're the type A's, but the rest of those people, right? Yes, ma'am.
We may actually, in society, be working fewer hours, but I think we feel like we're working longer because we're all of us connected.
Yeah. Yeah, the comment was about connectivity. Yeah, it's true. Who's got another prediction? Yes, ma'am.
When you mentioned about the colleges going away, I mean, I think the way that we've experienced them probably will. And so the need for technology will become more critical, particularly for communities that are economically disadvantaged. This will be a big issue because they may not have the technology to be able to access those classes.
Yep. It's one of those interesting questions. if technology is so rampant and so easy, why doesn't everybody in this room have every school in this room being taught by people with every course available in the world by the best people in every community? And what, I mean, maybe it's high schools that go away, not, just asking. We actually do an exercise with groups, by the way, to say the most outrageous things to provoke each other. It's okay. Yes, ma'am. Hop up and project. Go ahead.
There'll be less trust in institutional solutions. And we'll really understand more, and people will really understand the importance of economic inclusion.
Yeah. So, quite trust down, understanding down. Ugh. Yeah.
I have one that we actually didn't talk about at the table, but if you think about the fact that as you walk around, people have earbuds in and are looking at their phones, and when they're driving, they're looking at their phones, and the technology is replacing cashiers, so you're not actually having to deal with people. And so when we talk about soft skills and people skills, and we blame parents for not doing it, or we blame this, and if you look at technological innovation, it's putting us all in a bubble. We don't even have to make eye contact with one another. So I worry that and downtown, we're not interacting as a society. We don't have to, because we can get into an elevator and just look at our smartphone and not have to look at other people. What are the implications for these so-called soft skills and team building and people skills that we think are important?
Yeah, not just us. Employers think are some of the highest priorities too. Yeah.
So we talked about 4 things at our table. 2 of them are regarding demographics. The first is baby boomers either retiring or not retiring, as the case may be. Second was millennials shifting to become the largest share of the workforce. Beyond that, we talked about the remote workforce, and also then that transition between education and work, and how people are going to be dipping in and out of both worlds. And the skill set of learning how to learn will become more important.
Yeah. There's a book about, 10 years ago called Cycles. Anybody remember that one? That talked about the fact that we used to do the learn, work, retire cycle, and that the cycles were actually getting shorter and shorter, and we were working long enough till we could play for a while, and then being retrained and working long enough till we could play for a while. It was a fun book. What else? Yes, ma'am.
Being the only elected official probably in the room, my question was, are we, the political people, holding the economy hostage? We always have to be politically correct, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. And we began to talk about how the older generation being real staunch and wanting to hold on, and this is the way things are, and we're not letting go. And then we had the millennials rising up saying, hey, it's a new day, it's a new wave here. But the two still staying on the separate side, not coming together. There's some pitfalls that the millennials could learn from.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so having to cross that line and communicating.
Carly, it took almost an hour today, right? The over-under on when millennials are the problem conversation we estimate at 32 minutes in most groups. I'm just teasing you. I was a Black Sabbath fan in high school. My mother was sure the world was going to end and I would be ruined forever, so it's okay. Now, I agree with you though. The conversations, and part of the reasons is the conversations are not happening, but we do that with millennial groups too. Somebody, yes.
So we didn't talk about this at my table, but I just got back from a Smart Cities conference where a lot of the cities were talking about what they have to do to prepare for automated or self-driving vehicles.
Yeah. Changes everything, doesn't it? Yeah.
Successful communities in the future will be those that reach and handle diversity.
Yeah, Michael said that the successful communities in the future will be those that handle diversity, accept diversity the best. Not much, or we're all going to be little pods of our own somewhere, right? Except for those that are beating everybody else. Yeah, yes ma'am, here, and then up here.
Sort of capitalizing on that, around diversity, we've heard a lot of young people bashing. I would propose that perhaps as our, maybe not even millennials, the young people coming up behind
All right, Dave.
We just noted at our table that there wasn't anything about the environment or climate, and it seemed like maybe it's a bigger, that all of this sits within.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was on one of the change slides, but yes, yeah.
Just something that we think will
Yep.
probably change
It,
the next 10 years.
absolutely, sure does look that way, doesn't it? Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
This, I didn't talk about this at the table, but I've got to maybe hope, maybe predict that at some point it's going to be too inconvenient and too expensive to live in a large metro area, and that there'll be a way back at some point in the future. And the trends change, people's ideas about what's a good quality of life changes, and it's got to come back at some point. And maybe a recession might force it to happen in the future.
Anybody else? All right, there's good news. It's a hefty Italian lunch.